Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Today is the 24th of November, 2020. Welcome to Global Change Investors' first ever financial literacy campaign launch. My name is Mpoborondo. I'll be your program director for the day. I'd like to give a special welcome to Mr. Palile Hosla, as well as our other speaker for the day, Mr. Osman Torre. You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, just to go through a few of our rules for the day, everybody will be required to mute their microphones. We will unmute our microphones when it's time for questions and answers later on in the session. As I said before, my name is Mpoborondo, and in the next minute, we'll be starting with, well, it's 3 o'clock right now. We'll be starting with our Global Change Investors Financial Literacy Campaign. I'll hand over to Mr. David Musila, who will be giving us some background information on Global Change Investors and telling us what Global Change Investors is all about. As I've said before, everybody feel welcome. If you have any questions, I'd suggest that you just make a note of them. Raise your hand probably towards the end when it's time for questions and answers. Over to you, Mr. Musila.
Thank you so much, Mko. I don't know if I'm audible.
Yes, you are. Let me mute.
Let me see if I can turn on the camera. Can you all hear me? Can you all see me? All right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this opportunity. My name is David Musila. I'm one of the members of the Global Change Investors. So I'd like to take you through the purpose of today. So today, as GCI, we are launching a financial literacy campaign, which is basically about our intergenerational wealth creation with the view to address the socio-economic challenges that we currently have in our country and in our continent as a whole, the African continent. So these socio-economic challenges, they have a negative influence in our generation, be it lack of financial education, be it poverty, be it unemployment, which is the most critical one in our current environment. So this is the purpose of the day. We're launching that campaign, and we are glad to have our two speakers, Dr. Padili Khotla and Mr. Osman Torre, who will take us through that financial literacy. And we are so glad and excited to have you, say, Dr. Padili Khotla and Mr. Osman Torre. And thank you so much for joining us. And also just to extend our special appreciation to the members that have joined as well. And in the first time members, our visitors, and also the GCI members, you are all welcome as well. And then also those who are viewing us, because this session is being streamed online. So thank you so much. So just to go through, I want to share a presentation that I've prepared in terms of who is GCI. Can you see the presentation? Okay, I can see by the signals there. Okay, so GCI, in terms of us, answering that question, who are we? So we are actually a registered CIPC intergenerational wealth creating and investment company. So it was started in 2017. We just finished 3 years of existence now in August. So our purpose and our objective as an organization and as a cooperative is to lead investment, which is about creating investment, attracting investment, generating capital for our generation. It's actually intergeneration for us, for our children, our children's children, for the country, and for Africa at large, which will be going Africa and beyond. So that is who we are. We are a cooperative group of individuals come into an organization as a company to lead those investment and create intergenerational wealth. Just to go to the next slide. So when we talk intergenerational wealth creation, we are talking something that is very much long-term. It's not something that you put investment today and tomorrow you reap the results. Obviously, with that long-term, there is a process, right? So with this schematic or with this presentation or the picture that we've just shown in the slide, we want to show you in terms of the input, the outputs, and the outcome in terms of intergenerational wealth creation. So as a cooperative, we have got individuals. It may be a group of people as well. We come together as a cooperative. We share ideas, put those ideas into planning, strategize, and the output of that result into a business plan or a business in all. So that is those outputs that we have, that those business ideas results into an actual business. So the outcomes of that becomes a intergenerational wealth, or becomes a wealth in itself. So this is our main objective, and just to show you the process in terms of cooperative or joint ventures, there is a process, and our objective in this is to create a pool of resources, and with those pool of resources, we'll be able to create wealth. So currently, we have ventured into different sectors, and these are the sectors that we have highlighted at the moment. So yes, and that is in a nutshell who we are. We are a registered company. we're a group of people who came into a cooperative and are putting a pool of resources. And out of those resources, the outcomes will be to create a intergenerational wealth. Not forgetting that this is it's a long-term plan. This is a long-term initiative. And with that, I would like to leave you with one of the African proverb that says that if you want to go fast, you better go alone. But if you want to go far, you need to cooperate with other people, and you will reach your destination in your journey. And thank you so much. Back to you, Ms. Pobolondo.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Thank you. Thank you very much for that presentation. We will now hand over to one of our guest speakers for the afternoon, Mr. Osman Touré. To give you a little bit of background on Mr. African Touré, he was born on the 3rd of July, 1995, in Sare Samba village, Kiang East District of the Lower River region. He grew up as the second child from his family. He received Western education as his father was already a renowned Islamic scholar. He started his schooling career in 2003 from the Sare Samba Lower Basic School. In 2009, he moved to KF Upper Basic School. Then in 2013, he moved to the city in which one of the best schools in the Gambia, Masur Senior Secondary, are found. He finished his high school in 2016 and got enrolled in the University of the Gambia in September of the same year. In the university, he studied development and graduated in 2019. Osman holds different certificates in development-related areas, as in sustainable development goals, global health, and of recent a postgraduate training certificate in leadership from the AYINA think tank in Kigali, Rwanda. He is a mentee of Professor PLO Lumumba from the Lumumba Foundation in Kenya. Osman has been in the list of the most outstanding students in all the schools and set both moral and academic excellence. Aside from his schooling, he has participated in social work from his own community of Kiang and served as a voluntary teacher in different schools. Currently, he's serving as the program officer for Wings of Hope, the Gambia, which is a voluntary organization. Osman is also a member of his family business in transportation services, MS Seka Import and Export, in which he coordinates the logistics for all the trucking services within the sub-region. I must say, for such a young man or somebody of his age, he has accomplished a lot. And I believe that there's still much more to be accomplished. No matter our age, there's something we can always learn from those younger than us and those older than us. Over to you, Mr. Osman.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me in this platform. I am grateful for this. I just want to know how much time is allocated for me for the first presentation.
For the first presentation, I think you can go ahead and take 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank
yes,
you.
Okay, so basically, I will be looking at the Pan-African perspective when it comes to financial education and what we can do better in terms of improving Africa as a whole and Africans in general. So basically, when we look at Pan-Africanism in the first place, it is a term that was coined by Sylvester Williams, in which back in the 1900s, there was, a lot of agitation that what can be done to better improve the lives of Africans, because Max Garvey during this time had a travel in which he was just trying to find out what is there for the Africans, what is there that Africans are engaged in. And these were Africans, particularly in Europe and in the US. So what really happened is that after his travel, he came to realize that Africans everywhere that he went to were people that were living in the lowest standard in those societies. Most of them were not economically strong. Most of them were working and they were abused. They were maltreated in the workplaces and they were racially profiled in almost every society. And as a result of this, they came up with the movement and start to say that we need to form a universal Negro Improvement Association that is going to base on key reasons to uplift and self-reliance, making sure that Africans everywhere are uplifted out of poverty, making sure that Africans everywhere enjoys that dignity, that self-respect and self-reliance as an individual. And this was why the Black Star Liner, for instance, came into play. And that is what resulted to Back in the Africa movement. Back in Africa movement was also some of the initiatives that were taken by the Universal Negro Improvement Association, just to make sure that Africans within the US or anywhere else who were forcefully taken into those particular areas can return back to the continent. But this could not be possible without financial support. So that is why cooperative societies were built, there were factories built, newspapers and etc. that brings in Black people together for them to collectively involve themselves in things that were meaningful, that they can improve their lives in the areas where they were residing at the time, and those that were willing to come back to Africa, then they could facilitate a way for them to do so. So we come to realize that we live in a continent that has been suffering when it comes to economical independence. And this has been in place for more than 450 years. If you look at it from 1550 onwards. So you come to realize that many of the individual systems were put in place that were not meant to combat poverty. Systems were not put in place to improve the living standards of people or develop young individuals with talents, with skills, with financial mind in making sure that they can have a wealth generation in the things that we do. So we come to realize that we were forced to be in an education system that does not hold to solving the societal realities of this continent. And no wonder that is why today we're still having a problem of poverty in many parts of the continent. We still have a problem of inequality in many parts of the continent. We still have a problem of unemployment in many parts of the continent, because in these key things are very key in development. It is Doug Lysias who said in one of his literary contributions in development that for development to take place, three fundamental questions must be asked. What is happening to poverty? What is happening to inequality? And what is happening to unemployment? So if we can combat these things, if societies improve in it, if countries can improve in this, then therefore they are registering development over a period of time. But once we cannot achieve it, then we are not in those lines. Again, we will come to realize that us as a continent, when we look at our education system, be it financial education or financial literacy, is not it is not embedded in the primary education of the African societies. Most of us go to school and we were never taught how to gain money. You will meet accountant students who have been doing accountancy throughout their schooling career, and yet they don't know anything about wealth generation because they focus on a more theoretical part than expanding their thinking and innovative skills in making sure that they get a way through, in making sure that they can drive income. Again, we come to realize that our education system doesn't tell us on mechanisms and ways through which we can do a lot when it comes to investment. And that is the key. When we talk about financial literacy, we're talking about individuals having the ability to take risk in making investments and not saving. It's not about saving alone. It's about you as an individual being able to have that you know thinking in you, that innovative skill in you, that you can make an investment in a particular cause, investing in something that you really understand. And if you look at the literature by Read That, Poor That, for instance, this is the central argument that we sometimes come from societies that doesn't tell us on wealth generation, on income generation. We go to schools that doesn't teach us some of these skills, and they are very vital in self-upliftment, self-reliance, and registering the development that this continent desire. So we come to realize that that has been a long-term trajectory. And now, when we look at the lack of financial education and how it affects this continent on a global level, we will also come to realize that hardly do we have the opportunity, like, to input knowledge in the policies that we adopt within the African societies. Now, this is no longer on an individual level, but let us look at the bargaining power that this continent have in relation to other continents. What we have in our stock market, what we have as an exchange between Africa and other societies around the world, we come to realize that when policies are to be adopted from the United Nations level, it is experts from the US, it is experts from China, it is experts from Europe that does most of the inputs. Even with the few Africans that are present, most of them are moderates, not Africans who think the African way, but Africans who are Eurocentric in nature. So you come to realize that this continent have really been suffering when it comes to financial education and when it comes to financial mechanisms and structures that are actually put in place to uplift us from poverty, to make us register the development that we want. Looking at it back in the history, when the Bretton Woods institutions were formed back in 1945, immediately after the Second World War, you come to realize that we have the World Bank, the IMF, and etc. All these institutions were formed for the interest of the Western powers, be it the Europeans or that of the Americas. But then we find it difficult to realize that with all the loans that they were giving us, with all the investment that they said they were coming to do in the African society, was meant to make sure that resources in Africa are abstract to the Western world to benefit them. That is how most African countries were trapped on the loans that they could not pay, because we do not have structures that were able to use those loans into something that was meaningful to our societies. But most of it ended up in private pockets, in corrupt politicians, and that has affected this continent. And again, going back in history, when Europeans first were coming into Africa, the purpose of their coming was said to be an exploration. Later on, we realized an exploitation. But what we need to understand is that when international financial structures were formed, they were formed with a monopoly of Western knowledge and not actually some as it appears to be. Most of the international trades that we talk about today, most of the international structures that we talk about today, financially, they are in the hands of Westerners, be it the Americans, the Chinese, or that of the Europeans today. And that has really affected the society. Even if you look at it in in the 15th centuries and etc., they told us that they were coming to do an international trade, but then ships were only coming from one side. I don't remember in history when Asian ships were coming into Africa back in, let's say, Chinese ships were coming into Africa back in the 15th century. I don't remember in history where it says Chinese ships were going into Europe and America back in the 15th century. And even with the African ships that are said to reach Europe, they went in there, but not with a two-way links. It was only on one side. It was European coming into Africa, exploiting our resources, exploiting our people, and using them against their will into their own societies. So today, if we want to build a free Africa, an Africa that is liberated economically, an Africa that is liberated when it comes to politics, we have to focus on making that critical thinking in innovative skills and creating that markets within the African society, that the youths of this continent are well equipped with financial knowledge, that they can critically think about wealth generation within the African continent. We have all the resources, but it is about having the skill, having the innovative knowledge in making sure that the resources present within this generation, within this continent, can be used in a very productive way. So basically, when you look at wealth generation and education in financial dealings and etc., these are key areas that we need today as Africans, that we need today as youths, in order to reach to wherever we desire. Lastly, on an individual level, I would still want to come back to the writings of Stephen Covey when he wrote the 7 Habits of the highly most effective people. Some of the reason, some of the one thing that I find to be very particular is that in the recognizing the stage of individuals, that you start by being a dependent, someone who depend on others and all that, and later on you grow up to be an independent somebody. But the best part is when you can have the public victory, and that is interdependent. So when we are to focus on financial education, when we are to focus on wealth generation, we need to think about cooperation among the African youths. That I, as an individual, can register a company in the Gambia. How do I cooperate with other brothers in South Africa? How do I cooperate with other brothers in Sudan? How do I cooperate with other brothers in Rwanda, with other brothers in Madagascar, and etc.? Those are the kind of cooperation that we need, because once we can come together and have that unified force, then therefore we can liberate this continent financially. But as long as that is not done, we still have a problem. We still have a problem, and that is at an individual level and also at a continental level. We are aware today that despite all the resources that we have within this continent, our economy is controlled by outsiders. Today, they determine the price of our gold, they determine the price of our petrol, they determine the price of our granite, they determine the price of everything. So we are not in those positions today because economically, they have created structures that are not in favor with us. So we need to have that financial knowledge, education, and skills at an individual level, at a country level, or at a national level, and also at a continental level, in order to register the development that Africans desire as a whole. Thank you so much.
Indeed, I also feel like clapping my hands. That was very informative. So much of what you have said has touched base. Indeed, I think that does deserve a round of applause. So much of what you said it's so close to home. It's so true. It couldn't have been said any better. Thank you so much for that talk, Tori. It was really it is a wake-up call, and it's very encouraging to know that us as a collective can begin to do something towards a future that we want to see. It may not happen overnight, but we need to start. We need to begin somewhere and work together as a team rather than relying on Europeans or governments or whoever else it may be to build our financial future. Thank you so much for that. Without any further waste of time, I'd like to welcome our next speaker, Mr. Dr. Pali Lehohla. He's the former Statistician General of the Republic of South Africa, a position he has held since the year 2000 up to the year 2017. He served in several global capacities, such as co-chair of Paris 21, chair of the United Nations Statistics Commission, chair of the Statistics Commission of Africa, StatCom Africa, chair of the African Symposium of Statistical Development, also known as ASSD, vice president of the International Statistics Institution, ISI, sponsor of the Young African Statistician YAS movement. In 2014, he was one of the 25 member panel on data revolution, appointed by the UN Secretary General from 2015 to 2018. He was a member of the Independent Accountability Panel of the UN Secretary General for health of women, children, and adolescents. Dr. Lehohla has been a forceful advocate for improving the civil registration and vital statistics system in Africa. He consulted intensively in conflict out of conflict and fragile states on meta statistics. And this saw him cover Iraq, Afghanistan, Sudan, and Cambodia, just to mention some. His alma mater, the University of Ghana, in 2015 recognized him for his contribution to the development of statistics. The University of Stellenbosch awarded him an honorary doctorate in 2015, and in 2018, the University of KwaZulu-Natal awarded him an honorary doctorate. He is a professor of practice at the University of Johannesburg. He's a research associate at Oxford University. Welcome, Doctor. The floor is yours.
Osman has terrorized me because I think the big question he's going to ask is what are you doing with all this? Show us what you have done. And I think that's the right question to try and answer. And as I try to share my screen, which an elderly like myself do, and Osman just talks from his head, shows our different schooling. But I do have a relationship with the Gambia. Mr. Jane, Abdoulaye Jane, who was the head of ECA, I was part of the team. In fact, he invited me to go and create a statistics office at the ECA when he was there as the Secretary General. So I have a lot of fond memories with him. And also there was a student from the Gambia, Dauda Fall, who studied with us at the University of Lesotho. And so many people used to ask, everybody seems to know Dauda Fall. I think Africa has hope. Listening to what this young man has just presented, I think he's young in age, but very elderly in thinking. If you were to think about buying a brain, whether it will be my brain or his, I will buy his because mine has stopped thinking. His is that of an elder. Now, so let me think about barriers to financial literacy. He has taken a historical perspective. I'm trying to deal with a more, not a historical, but an empirical perspective. Not that he didn't go empirical in his analysis, but I thought I should take a country perspective to actualize what he has said, which we already know, which he has articulated so well. But I thought I should take the example of South Africa, point to the failures or challenges that are before us. And I start with this, looking at how we actually in the future, what are the educational constraints, what are the poverty constraints, what are economic literacy constraints, and what then is to be done. And I think he has actually answered the question, and probably then I'll not talk about what is to be done because the youth has already spoken and said, this is what we have to do. So I think I'll leave the what is to be done to what he has presented. How are we killing the future in South Africa? This is Kliptown. It's a station, and it's a very important place in South Africa because that's where the Freedom Charter was born, in Kliptown. But Kliptown, this is what it is now. You can't, and it's being ripped off in the way it is. And what happened to the dream of freedom after we were free in South Africa? This is the dream of freedom that we are having. And what is happening to our rail lines, cost of education, cost of transport, everything, it's the infrastructure, it's becoming a nightmare. Why is not bread affordable? It's not affordable because rails and trains are no longer available and transport costs to work and back. So fundamentally, there are questions you haven't asked, and therefore we are getting half answers. And we have continued in this slumber of half answers up to now. And I think the young man there has said a mouthful around. Now, what happened to the dream? Well, everybody is looting, and there are new ways of looting. The unemployed say, well, we'll dig the road so that we can be listened to, and perhaps we'll be given a tender to rebuild the road. So dig a hole to also cover that hole as a way of making money. It's a very, very dangerous situation. Here is myself when I was as the statistician, and I made a serious mistake on calculating consumer price index in 2003. It was a very expensive mistake, and there's Trevor Manuel. And cartoonists wouldn't spare us at all. They wouldn't spare me. They said, well, that fault. And they look at how they put the cap on my face. I can't, the eyes are covered. And they're saying, this guy sees nothing, he has nothing. He cannot do this work that he says he's doing. So, Sapiro couldn't spare us. There it is, says 1 + 1 is the long number. And then at the end, the child says, oh, teacher, you are wrong. 1 + 1 is 2, but there's a long number there. And what the young man from Gambia has been saying, it's actually, this is the education that we got, that they, as the young people, are going to correct. They cannot continue on what we have continued on as the earlier or later generation. And of course, look at how we respond to service delivery and how do whites respond to service delivery. You see this particular differences in articulating frustration. Of course, there are things that we have to understand. There's 400 years of slavery, 400 years of colonialism, 300 years of colonialism, 50 of apartheid, and of course, 26 of our own mistakes. Now, when you look at this data, and you will see that, in South Africa, Fergut, I haven't gotten your slide of Fergut here, who said, what is the use of teaching Bantu child mathematics when it can't do it in practice? And that's what Osman is saying, that we are being taught things that we can't do in practice. And Fergut said that. So that's why he gave us Bantu education. He said, no, give them Bantu education, these guys, because we don't want to give them things that they can do in practice. Now, I'd like you to concentrate on this gray line. It goes this way and then goes over there. And it goes this way and goes over there. So it's male, female. But this gray line is the teachers of mathematics. And you see that this side is their age at their age for males, age for females. They had the lowest unemployment rate, but they have the highest unemployment rate now. Not because they have retired, but because something happened in society. Here are females, lowest unemployment rate, but highest unemployment rate. Now, what happened in South Africa is when blacks started fearing death, whites and the owners of Old Mutual and those kinds of things started recruiting people to go and enlist them for insurance. It was not that we didn't fear death all along, we have and we had stockpiles. But once we started being individualistic and wanted to go faster, we wanted to have our own insurance. I wanted to have my own insurance. And then, of course, who would you get to go and sell insurance? A teacher who knows mathematics, who can add 1 + 1. So those teachers got in there during Old Mutual times and Sanlam and so on. But once we went electronic in terms of getting these policies, they got dumped and they're unemployed now. This is the destruction of the education system. So, so what has happened, of course, unemployment as a driver of poverty has become the biggest driver of poverty from 2001 to 2011. You can see this bars here. That, and of course, the politicians will come and talk to us about water, cooking, heating, and so on during elections. and as though they are the things that matter the greatest. What matters the greatest here as a driver of unemployment is education, poor education, lack of investment in education. People can always provide their water, their dwellings, their sanitation for as long as they have gotten into education. So you need to really liberate people through education in order to accumulate these particular assets. But by continuously politicking about these, when we have to discuss matters that are important. And of course, if you come and talk about education to the electorate, they will not vote you to power. Come and talk to them about water, they will. So you can see that over a period of time, while in 5 years, poverty as a driver of or rather unemployment as a driver of poverty grew by 7 percentage points. In 10 years, it grew by 5 percentage points. In 5 years, it grew by 12 percentage points, almost doubled in half the time. So it means that this is an aggressive drive of poverty, and it is getting more and more with COVID-19. And these are the things which are important for life, but are not the most serious. And then, of course, this is followed by education, lack of education, years of schooling. When you add these two columns together, these rows together, 13 plus 52, 65% of our misery is driven by education, a lack of education and unemployment. And if you come to the youth themselves, you can see what are the drivers here. 35 plus this, that's almost 72% for the youth are driven by not in education, employment or training, that there's no adult employed in the household, and that their education outcomes are very low. So, of course, these are just what happened over time. And if we want to look at this over a period of 70 years, we can see that whites had already acquired high educational standards long, long, long ago, whereas blacks here were at the bottom of the rung. And then as we go to higher education like standard 9, blacks perform lower and here perform lower. And the most important is the fact that of the children that get born, 1 million each year, only 610,000, 1.2 million, half of those will write matric, and only 2/3 of that will pass. So the minister will say 72%. But if you were to work this on the basis of how many children were born, you are actually at 1/3 of the population that actually complete primary basic education successfully. So year in, year out, we lose 600,000 youth into or 700,000 youth into a no man's world. And of course, these are the number of children that were born in 2016, that were born in 2002. And those who by 2010 or 2016 actually write matric because they were born here, 2002. And by the year 2016, they're about 14 years. Now, at university, the performance is also equally bad in that in the 80s, blacks used to perform very well. And then in the 2015 post-liberation, they performed very badly. Of course, in terms of absolute numbers, there are more that go to university, but in terms of this effectiveness and efficiency of the system is actually doing badly amongst colors and blacks, whereas whites, you can see, are doing better. So the challenges are very, very major. And I need to just go quickly, and you'll see around skilled employment, whites largely skilled because they have had this advantage all along. And if you start in 2017, or rather in 2000, this graph shows 2008 and 2017. And the 2008 is this blue. And by race, you can see that the black people are not performing well. And by 2017, actually, they lose the advantage they used to have in 2008 in terms of being in the skilled category, particularly for the youth who are 15 to 24. So as we try to understand this literacy that we want to talk about, we really have to understand what underpins it. And things have even gotten worse, or rather, they got better by 1 percentage point to 10, from 9% in 2016. Now, what are the issues? The issues are very important. And I think this is what Osman has said when he talks about what are the outcomes and the impacts that we want to make. And for that, you need to think scenarios. And in terms of scenarios, you think about policies, a mixture of policies that we have to implement. Policies such as trade. What do you do with trade? And in South Africa, we did an exercise here around scenarios. And we have Gwara Gwara, which is Imisa Rising Growth, Isibujwa, and Naila Walk. These scenarios are undergirded with a complex modeling of econometrics, to say what is going to happen to South Africa. Sadly, at the moment, we are actually heading to a Gwara Gwara situation in South Africa, a worse than business as usual or trickle-down path, because we are beholden by the Bretton Woods institutions, and we are beholden by the ratings agencies, and we don't change course. We want to please them at all costs. I mean, in the US, nobody cares about these ratings agencies. They rate firms and not countries. In Africa, they rate countries, of course, via firms, and then they junk. And we want to please them by saying, no, 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 you shouldn't go junk. Now, this is what happens in South Africa. The myth of buy black. These privates, that's where blacks buy. Or rather, these are the outlets in which we buy, large shops and the private service providers. All these are owned by whites here in South Africa. When you look at countries like Egypt, these are owned by Egyptians, small shops, and there are no large shops. You go to Nigeria, there are no large shops, but all these are owned by Nigerians. But here in South Africa, these are owned by whites, and blacks have very little in terms of the production systems. So they are not producers of anything. Theirs is as consumers. And where do they consume? In these large shops and private service providers. So we have a very serious problem. Now, why bread is not affordable, and if we look at this across countries from South Africa to Tanzania, you see the alarming size. The size here is large shops, and they are owned by whites. So is private service providers. These will not take South Africa anywhere. In terms of retail trade, including in Ghana and so on, you can see how retail trade is treated. Traders, these are ordinary Africans in those countries. But when you come to South Africa, it's owned exclusively by whites. So that's not surprising that poverty is black. And of course, in terms of unemployment, you can see the time plot here from 1960, from 1994, right across. You can see the time plot of poverty here, or rather unemployment in South Africa that is going on. You can see that. You can see it from 1994 to 1999 to 20. That if you join these top parts here, you will see that this unemployment is growing unabated. You just connect these top parts here, you will see that unemployment is growing. And it doesn't surprise, therefore, that we will see with coronavirus, not only did these people who are 15 to 24 and these ones who are 25 to 34 actually losing their absolute share of employment. The absolute share of employment is being lost here. As you can see on this part here, their absolute share is being lost, and it's been lost here, and they have joined the unemployment on the left. Only those who are 35 to 44 have held on to their jobs, so are those 55 to 64. But unemployment this side has actually increased dramatically. So this is a comparison in 2018, same thing, but with Corona, you can see the devastating effects of that comes to those who are 25 to 34. So the key issue really is that as Africans, and here I'm just going to conclude now with the scenarios. The Gwara Gwara scenario is about, here we are talking about what would the ANC do in 2019. That's, well, the focus is on state capture, uprooting, but there are annual cuts in real spending on social services. And under coalition government by 2024, increasing talks of shock therapy, so further cuts. Consequently, the state withdraws subsidies. And then you see the private state of states, private states of the state, the poor becoming themselves, the rich being themselves, everybody isolating themselves, the poor being poorer. And of course, all this outcome of the measures is really an immiserizing growth if we don't turn the tide. The bourgeois scenario is the trickle down. Well, macroeconomic supply side measures are used to propel the economy onto some kind of a higher growth path, but the austerity measures constrain and the debt through expenditure cuts again. And of course, future performance of the economy crumbles. And then of course, we also modeled the Naila walk, which is pro-growth, pro-poor. Unfortunately, our country has not followed this. It has followed the other two scenarios, and the Gwara Gwara scenario is the one that will come out. So it is for us, it is for you as youth, that you actually go into policy analysis, economic policy analysis, well ahead of even financial literacy, or at least at best simultaneously. If you are not involved in the policy design, then the Bretton Woods institutions and all these grand designs of colonialism will persist. I thank you.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. This has been so eye-opening. I don't know how else to put it, but like, I'm mind-boggled. I didn't, like, wow. I don't know what to say, but this is amazing. I have a lot of questions, but I'm sure a lot of other people have a lot of questions to ask as well. Anybody who does have a question, please raise your hand or make use of the chat box inside this Zoom app so that we can take note of all your questions. I'll hand over to you, Elder Brian, if you have the first question.
I do not necessarily have a question, but I think to commend the three presenters that have shared with us what has really transpired. I think from Dr. Palili, the Gwara Gwara one is scary, Doctor. We cannot afford to go that route as a country, because if we were to do that, we might even pull the whole SADC region with us, because it does look like if South Africa was to go Gwara Gwara, then Zimbabwe follows, Mozambique, the likelihood will follow. I'm not sure who will be left in the SADC region. Possibly Osman will talk to us about what will happen in West Africa if Southern Africa has to go the Gwara Gwara route. I think in terms of what Osman raised, it was challenging. I think when you have to think of how as Africans we need to cooperate to deal with our challenges, not individually, but collectively as a whole, because the challenges that I think he used to raise, the questions and the issues that he raised in possibly emanating from West Africa or Central West Africa, they are almost the same as what we are facing with in Southern Africa. Therefore, there is not much that I think on our own we can do. We need to cooperate, we need to collaborate. Hence, I think this financial literacy program that we are launching today becomes very, very central. And I think possibly more as I conclude this part, one will be able to ask, I think Dr. Palio, in terms of you said we need to go into policy analysis much more aggressively to understand the policy analysis. And you said literacy must come second, or if it comes to a push, let them go together. How do we do that? I think as young people or middle-aged people, particularly looking at, I think, the scenario that you also painted around the lack of education or the type of education that we have received not being consistent with what the current situation demand of us here in South Africa and possibly in the region. Thank you, Mpo.
Thank you for that question. Would you like to take the floor to answer that question, Mr. Osman?
You are muted, Osman.
Sorry, which question was it? That he says what will happen to West Africa? Or the last part of the question?
You can start with what would happen to West Africa in your point of view.
Yes, I think the most important thing is that we need to understand is that Africa as a continent is one people together. And whether we accept it or not, if there is any country in Africa today that is suffering, we have the equal problem reflecting in any corner of this continent. Sometimes it does not just affect us, but even our brothers in the diaspora go through the same problem as a result of a failure internally within the African continent. So if we want to build that like a continent that is economically very strong, a continent that is developed, a continent that registers the fastest possible form of development, then therefore we have to cooperate. And the last part of Doctor's presentation was very, very key, and that is comparative public policies. That is why young people also equally needs to look into this. Our governments in Africa have to understand that they should start looking at things inward, making comparative public policies within the African continent and what other African countries can learn from each other. But you find it that it is very difficult for Africans to learn from policies adopted by fellow African countries. I saw this particular policy in Rwanda called the Made in Rwanda policy, which is just amazing. Made in Rwanda policy. You go to their supermarket, you see made in Rwanda. You walk to the streets, any product that you buy, it's almost everything made in Rwanda. So I was like, so what is stopping the Gambia from adopting a policy like this, made in the Gambia policy? So, but we find it difficult in our own countries to adopt things that work within African countries, but we prefer to go and borrow Western ideologies, Western policies that doesn't work for us. I always say this. We are battling, we are in a battleground with individuals that have been dominating us for more than 400 years. We can never trust them for the future of this continent if we want to liberate ourselves.
Wow. Wow. That's deep. Doctor, I'd like to ask a question just to bring it closer to home, to latch onto the question that Mr. Ndo asked with regards to policy making. How do you bring that closer to home, to us? I'm a general person who walks in the street. I heard about GCI, and I know that I want my children to have a better future than the upbringing that I had. I know that I don't want my children to suffer after I'm gone. And I understand that part of GCI's vision and mission is to create intergenerational wealth. How do you link that policy making statement to somebody, an average Joe like myself in the street? This, I understand you need to leave us in a few minutes. If you can just answer that question, then also give us any closing comments that you have. Also, if anybody has any questions for the doctor before he rushes off, please raise them now. Thank you. Over to you, doctor.
Well, I mean, Osman is correct. You can't trust people who had oppressed you for so many years and hope that they will surrender privilege. Privilege is fought for, you take it away, you don't say, it doesn't get surrendered. And I think if we think it will be surrendered, we have another 400 years. And you can see it, that in South Africa, there's just too much privilege. And we have sold our souls, ourselves as South Africans. I think Lembede in 1945, when he said freedom in our lifetime, they were able to hold that freedom in our lifetime over a period of time. Mandela, Sisulu, Owar, Mbeki, all those trialists ensured that there's freedom. But we are hardly 26 years after that freedom was attained, the political one, that we have actually totally gone haywire. I mean, I don't know how we can explain this. It's so bad that I'm afraid your child is not going to get any better. Absolutely not. It will be an oddity like myself and an oddity like Osman, because the policies that do not enhance predictability, not of survival, but of thriving of whole societies, are not worth what they are written on. So if you take South Africans, 1.2 million of them get born. Only 600,000 of them will complete what is called mandatory basic education. Only those will complete that. But only 400 will probably complete it successfully. But only 150,000 in that 400 will actually get the matric exemption. So basically, the 1 million children are lost completely, year in, year out. That you cannot change overnight. And that's the brilliance of Verwoerd, who said, don't teach them mathematics because they don't know how to use it in practice. Until we tackle that, Verwoerd, who died in 1966 under the knife of Safenders, we have hardly scratched that. And then, of course, the minister and the education policy says that you will pass at 33%, and then we introduce math literacy. And then in the news today, that more than a lot actually are writing math literacy because the teachers want it, the children want it, the minister want it, the presidents want it, because they want to see higher pass rates. Over what? Over nonsense. Pass rates of nonsense, math literacy, lower levels of education, confirming what Verwoerd said. If we don't tackle these policies and get down to that, we have hardly started dealing with the matters, let alone dealing with the policies, which is policy space. It's a complex one. So we actually need to be active. And I'm very happy, Osman, people are like this, that there's hope. I'd actually lost hope, but I'm actually encouraged that there's hope. So financial literacy is important, but economic policy and social policies that deal with all these things are even far more important, because aspects of success are in a society that is financially literate. Those are indicators of success. They are not success itself. Success is in actually crafting the policies. And the Osman's presentation was all about policy. Where do these things come from? Where are they going? And what are their outcomes? It's all policy space. And until we have gone to the manuscripts in Mali, in Timbuktu, in the pyramids, and in Zimbabwe, to know architectural designs by Africans, these guys are going to defeat us continuously. This is the richest part of the world, the continent, but it has the poorest people. So why do they come here when we are poor? Because they have seen that they can continue to leave us poor. So today when they said they have been junked, I said, well, you can't die twice. The first time you die, which was the last junk in the, just after the coronavirus, we died. You can't die twice. We got to know that we are on our own, and we should forget about these institutions. For 26 years, we have been trying to please them. high time we have to answer the question, poverty, unemployment, and inequality. Just as Osman has said, those are the questions I ask all the time in the country, that these things that we are having a laundry list of, they will spend so much money on this, so much money. What in the end will we see in terms of unemployment reduction or full employment, poverty reduction, and inequality reduction? If we cannot hold the government to that, then they'll feed us all the time the laundry list of what they know they'll spend, but they do not know what its impact will be. I have to leave for another meeting.
Okay.
Doc, before you leave, there are two questions, and Vusi has raised his hand. One is, the first question is, are you saying that this tide we are in cannot be turned? The other one says, how do we ensure that our African students study policy and policy development? Yes, I agree that we can't trust European policy writers. Shouldn't we start recruiting at a high school level and channeling them to the right curriculum? And possibly let's allow Vusi to raise his question. Then you can close with that and give us your parting shot. Vusi, over to you. You can unmute yourself. It does look like he has difficulty in unmuting himself. I think you can go ahead, Doc, and answer this one.
Well, Vusi wrote to me and said I should come and present here. And I said, but I know very little about financial literacy. The only time I tried it, I failed dismally because we recruited, he used to work for me at Stats SA, or at least for the country when I was heading Stats SA. And we wanted to pay people some money. And we forgot one thing, that the people we have recruited are not recipients of money. And we use the ATM to pay them. So the very first time they had that card, they had to go and operate it at an ATM. Even their grandmothers do better at ATM. We thought that because they know the cell phone, they will do better. No, they didn't. So parts of financial literacy are about understanding the ecology within which you function. And we were ecologically fallacious in terms of trying to design a solution. So all our solutions must be designed to be fit for purpose, understand what is happening. So now coming to the questions that you have asked. Yes, I don't think countries go into very, very serious problems. We can see how countries fall, how states collapse. Ours is likely to collapse like any other state because of our own doing. But it's also our own doing that can reverse these things. But we cannot hope for reversal if we don't actually face the facts and tackle those facts head on. So we need to act on these things to understand them. The question that you have to ask the president when he says there's an investment meeting is, what are your targets? Don't tell us in the general that then we will reduce. Let us have a very clear target as to what it is that we intend doing. And then once we know what we will deliver, then let's work on the policies that will deliver that, so that we can make the hard choices. I mean, if you think about the 200,000 children, people that are going to be employed and sent to the Department of Education, who will be employed on the 1st December. I mean, you have to just say, did these people ever think that these 200,000 that they are recruiting now are going to work with South Africa's future? Would you put yourself before those people to come and work as assistants in a medical institution? I wouldn't. I'm saying recruit 200,000, take them through school for 2 years, train them thoroughly, make it that now your transition system for a better and different education. Don't just recruit like that and then put them there and solve the problem of unemployment. Vusi, in 1996, we solved the problem of unemployment by recruiting 100,000 enumerators. And people were saying, no, you can't. And I agreed that perhaps we should employ people who can read and write. Of course, they were matriculants, and some others who did that. But that's not how you solve the problem of unemployment, by unleashing 200,000 people into an education system, recruiting from a system that is very, very broken, where people fight for jobs. That's contaminating that education system even further. So these are some of the things that as society we must say no. The Nigerian governor of Kaduna made teachers write exams. And once these teachers had written exams, he actually dispensed with 40,000. The parents wanted to rebel and say, no, 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 you can't do this. He asked the question, do you want your children to be taught by these people who have failed? What do you think you are going to get? When he asked that question, the strike was over. He said, now I'll go and train real teachers. You need to make those kinds of decisions to solve the problems of South Africa. At the moment, we are tinkering on the margins, tinkering all the time. So first, in order to engage society so that they understand, society understands scenarios, build scenarios with them, garner information and understanding, bring the technical processes into those scenarios to actually undergird those scenarios with the most crucial information to see the possibilities of success. Run those scenarios into 30, 40 years ahead with all the uncertainty that we know. Review them continuously and check whether you are still on track. Learn fast, make mistakes quickly, change course as rapidly, but use evidence and data to drive purpose. But define purpose very, very clearly. So I have to leave. Vusi, my apologies. Osman, thank you very much for connecting in this kind of fashion. I have hope when the youth are like this, fired up like this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Doctor, for being part of this launch of our financial literacy campaign. We are taking over that challenge. We'll keep on knocking because you have challenged us more this afternoon to say it's not sufficient. We'll need to look for evidence, even in our financial literacy. We need to look at what are these outcomes that we want to see achieving, because we'll need to align them with the policy imperatives that are there in our own country. Thanks for coming through, and God bless.
Thank you very much.
Over to you, Mpo.
Thank you. We have a question from, or a comment from Charmaine Kopolo. She says, it would be too late at high school level. We have to start teaching them about money at grade 1 level. This will ensure that they do not get in to retrace. Do we have any other questions, comments from the members, from the attendees, from the floor? Anybody with a question or comment to make? Feel free. While you think of your question, Mr. Tsietsi Ngobese will be preparing to give us the call to action.
Yes. Sorry. So I equally have another meeting to catch up, and it's almost, I think. Let me see. Yeah, it's almost time.
Okay, would you like to go ahead and give us your remarks?
Yes, maybe I will have to do that, and then I will join you in your upcoming events and other platforms.
You're welcome.
Yes. So finally, I just want to say thank you to everyone for being patiently there, listening to us. And it's equally important that we start doing some things like this. It is high time that we connect to one another. Um, we have to better understand the African reality. It is no more like being a South African alone. It is about being an African. It is no more about being a Gambian alone. It is about being an African. So that is what we need to promote among ourselves, and us as the youths need to be in the center. Once we understand each other, we understand what each other want in various African countries, and then trying to dig down in literatures. Like lastly, Dr. made mention of something which is very, very important, that if we want to move ahead, we must go and look at what is in Timbuktu, what is in the pyramids of Egypt, what is there in Zimbabwe, making sure that we get to know these realities, because these were literatures that were shaped by individuals back with knowledge, and they built a civilization out of it. And that is exactly what we need today. We are not saying we are going back to 500 years to live as that as Africans, but we are going 500 years back in knowledge to equip ourselves in preparing for the next 500 years. And that is core in every society. But the notion that Africa cannot do it without reliance on the West. Africans cannot move without having to go and travel in the Western world and etc. It is good. We can travel as much as we want. We can go and discover other places. We can go and look for knowledge everywhere. But then let us have that sense of patriotism that wherever we are, let us always be thinking about what can we do for home. Let us start helping each other to capacitize individual. If you are a youth and you are an entrepreneur, you have certain skills in you. It is good enough if we can do some of those things. So we can do a lot of things by helping each other. We can do a lot of innovative mechanisms that we can use to help each other to grow and etc. These are skills, there are knowledge with Africans. We have traveled. Let us build more network, more cooperations among ourselves, and then we can promote trade and etc. So no one is young enough to do this. And Dr. made mention of something very, very important. How do we influence the policies? If we are not economically strong, if we are not that financial literate, if we are not financially educated, we can't influence the policies. And remember, whether we like it or not, those formulating the policies are the individual that decide our fates. We need to get to know what they are doing on a daily basis on things that affects us in the next generation. Africa, for instance, set an agenda called Agenda 2063. In 2063, among the people who formulates this particular agenda, whom among them are you going to hold accountable for that particular policy in the event that it doesn't work? None of them. They will all be in their graves. So that is what we need to understand. We are no longer leaders of tomorrow. We are leaders of today. And we must influence policies today. We must influence decisions today. And we can do that if we have the knowledge and set a pattern of growth for this continent. That is what the founding fathers of Pan-Africanism were doing. That is what the people that we remember today were doing. And remember, politicians always think about next elections. We have to think about next generations. That is how you liberate a continent. That is how you liberate a country. And that is how you liberate a people. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Osman, for those closing comments. Every time you speak, I'm just left with words like, wow, because you're so right. And these are truths that we need to continuously remind each other of. A wise man once said, Mr. Lazarus Musandiwa, he once said, Poverty is not defeated if you are rich alone, if you get a tender and you alone are rich. Poverty is defeated when your next door neighbor, your uncle, your mother, your family members, everybody around you is uplifted from that poverty as well. Thank you so much for those words. Any last question or comment towards Mr. Osman before he leaves us? Elder Brian, Mr. Ndong?
No, mine is to say thank you to Osman. I think it was very, very important that you joined us in this launch of our financial literacy campaign. Particularly, I think the perspective that you have shared with us, that of cooperating in our working together as a continent and as a people. You have challenged us. I think anyone and everyone who is attending this launch today will understand that even our financial literacy need to talk of how do we cooperate as Africans, no longer as South Africans, no longer as Gambians, but as South Africans for our common destiny. Because if we do not do that, we weaken our resolve for 2063. If death was to come, you are very, very correct that those that champion, I know for a fact that our current Minister of Cooperative Governance, Minister Dr. Nkosazana Zulu, she was the commissioner, the chairperson of the AU Commission when the 2063 agenda was crafted. And not that I want to see her dead, but at her age, in 2063, that question that you have raised, it's such a profound question. Even if she might still be alive, the impact of what she would have crafted, she will not feel it because someone, somewhere, somehow, she will possibly in the old age home, someone looking after her in this way and on that way. And I'm thankful that you committed yourselves to be part and parcel of this conversation. We are continuing the conversation. We are continuing with the financial literacy. We are continuing with engaging economic policy. And there is nothing that will stop us to achieve this intergenerational wealth creation for the continent, for Africans in particular, here in the continent of Africa. Thank you, Osman. And I think from the program director, she had already released you. And I also say thank you for becoming part of this session. You are more than welcome to leave.
Yeah.
Mpo?
Thank you very much. I'll go through a few more comments and questions that have come up on our chat. There's just one correction. There was Charmaine Kupolo, the statement she said it would be too late in high school level. We need to start teaching them about money at grade 1 level. This will ensure that they do not get into the rat race. That comment is noted. Somebody else says, Mr. Mbraini Namatandani says, policy on education, mathematics has to be compulsory. Communities taking lead to ensure that all children attend school, financial literacy to be part of the curriculum. Charmaine Kupolo says, Angelica says, awareness is key because my people perish for lack of knowledge. Well done on the campaign. And then Charmaine Kupolo says, well said and well put, Osman. Mr. Vusile Matebula says, thanks for the presentation. I missed some parts. Thank you, Mr. Osman. Africa is ready for you to take its children to another level. Indeed, I agree with these comments. That's very true. If anybody else has a comment, question, or anything to add, you can do so. I think Mr. Tsietsi Ngobese is also ready to give us the call to action as we give 2 more seconds for any comments. Well done, everyone. I'm proud of each of you. That's Tebogo Ikaneng. You can continue to give your comments or inputs on the chat. Mr. Tsietsingobese, over to you.
Good day, everyone. Am I audible enough?
Yes.
Okay. So the bar has been raised so high. So, but before I start deliberating on my call to action, just need to share the screen quickly here. Okay, unable to go through. Okay. Technology is disappointing me, but it's fine. Thank you very much to everyone for the opportunity. So the bar has already been raised so high that there's a lot to do and a lot to learn from the previous speakers. Coming just to give a bit of a background of my side. So my name is Tsietsingobese. I'm an actuary by profession, but before that, I started my entrepreneurial career as a street vendor in 2002, sold vegetables house to house using a wheelbarrow from 2004 until 2016. And then I started selling sweets from grade 2 to grade 12. And then I later ventured into household deliveries of food items and cleaning detergents. And then started a Stockfell contributing scheme with a group of friends to increase the saving capabilities. And then in 2010, I joined the financial market, which a focus on online share trading, bond indices, your cryptocurrency, and your forex exchange on a self-managed portfolio. And then I graduated in 2017 from the University of the Free State with a degree in BSc Actuarial Science. And then I co-founded a company called We Solve for X, which is an actuarial consulting firm. So my transition was from classroom to boardroom. So to give you a bit of a background on our personal research during my studies, what I identified is that everything that I was taught, I've done it before, I just didn't know the term. From your risk analysis, your risk management, everything like in the textbook. So then when I look at the built society in terms of how the insurance industry was built, which is what we specialize mostly on, it was built on the concept of stockfels, which is the revolving of money, where money is collected and then given to the next stakeholder, and then to a person who you trust. So that's how in the 1800s, the insurance industry was built through what they call the syndicate of the stockfels, but they call them the built society. We started in the Lloyd's, where it was a Lloyd's coffee shop, where the reason they started it is that when they send their ships to go and get goods, should they not come back, they should be able to have enough money to compensate the loved ones of the people who were left behind. So that concept has been fundamental with us as Africans from what we call stockfels. Where you go to Mozambique, they call it Chikiti. Each and every country have their own types of stockfels, which is about revolving of funds amongst the members. But from that concept, I don't know where we lost the plot, where that fundamental of the stockfel was diminished in the years. I think maybe those who were entrusted to lead from the fund kind of somehow missed the ball. But then we go back to what has the South African economic structure look like. So in 2016, in 2018, we released an article called The Greatest Township Heist, where we found over 14 trillion was lost in the township and rural economy through to your Ponzi schemes, and other forms of ways of scams, like your public scams, whether it's in the faith-based scams or the Ponzi schemes or pyramid schemes, whichever way that you call it. It boils back to their financial literacy. And according to research, over 58 million South Africans, 81% of those ones are black. And out of those 81%, 96% from the age of 7 have already been exposed to borrowing money, either from a friend or from a family member, and have already been exposed to gambling. Whether they're playing Amadais or China being sent by the parent or Lotto or any form of gambling. So from that early age, we are already being introduced to that form of informal financial literacy. So if you look at the biggest bulk spending of the South African black population is deliberately on borrowing and gambling. That's the first thing we are taught as young people, you know. So I've played in China, being sent by my mom. I've done almost all forms of gambling, from Mama Ali to football, all these different forms of gambling that include financial loss, right? So that chance of winning, it becomes very, very difficult to change from the saving to a saving and have a long-term view of your finances when you know if I place Israel or a spinning where when you spin a coin, whether it hands on a head or a tail, you have a 50% chance of winning. So you always have that eager that when you have money, you want to go and try your luck. Maybe today is a bad day or it's a good day, you win more. And that leads to what we call addiction, slowly but surely, because if you've been gambling all your life, or being exposed to gambling all your life from the age of 7, by the time you're in your mid-20s, you have learned all the tricks of gambling for over a decade. If you go in town or anywhere where you see a spot bet, whether it's in your lotto or whichever, if you look at the queue of people who queue there to bet there, 10 years down the line, 10 years down the line or 10 years ago, they were in their mid-teens. And then which becomes the very same issue with the elders. So now what I did on my personal home project, I look at my home gambling portfolio and I realized that we spend over 20,000 a year on betting with an average of 400 a week on China and Lotto. And that money we have never won a big jackpot, but that's what the family has been spending a year. So if you calculate that money on my family alone, over 22,000 a year, and add the other families, we are sitting with over 40 billion per year. And if you take that and we start gambling over 20 years now, so you times that by 20, then you see it's a big number. Hence, the betting industry or the gambling industry accounts for trillions and trillions of rands throughout the continent. And all those type of approach, and the reason we're not winning in that fight is because it has been made attractive deliberately by those who understood the power of money, who understand and would advertise and spend more money in the billboard, the advert, on how nice and fancy it is to bet and hope for the future, while we neglect to bet in our own space, and we lost the values of our elders, who instead of betting, they will go and work on the field, head cattle, and plan for the future. So we lost that in the process. So what we took as a direct response in GCI and trying to understand the fundamentals of savings, it boils down to education. Unless we educate ourselves and our own people, we will still have the same challenge 20 years down the line of being crying foul to these attractive Ponzi schemes and other forms that guarantee quick returns. So our focus of the financial literacy program that we're launching today has threefold. The first one is the gambling portfolio. The second one is the borrowing portfolio. And the last one is the savings portfolio. So before we can go to the savings portfolio, we start with the first two, the gambling and the borrowing portfolio. In most of these communities, what we call so-called poor communities, who on average circulate over
It is frozen. The network has thrown him.
While we wait for him to reconnect, can I quickly read a message, one of our messages in the group chat from Charmaine Kupolo says, did you hear that? He started selling sweets between grade 2 and grade 12. That's the way to go. Teach children about money from birth. Instead of buying them sweets, let's buy them a money box to start saving. And on birthdays, buy them shares of the GCI co-op. I fully agree with Charmaine there. Charmaine has asked another question. What are the three portfolios by Tsietsi? He mentioned the first one is gambling. The second one is borrowing. The third one is saving. He was still saying that before we talk about saving, let's first understand the dynamics of gambling, understand the dynamics of borrowing, and then we'll move on to saving. Is Mr. Ngobese back with us?
No, the network seems not to be favoring him. He reconnected and then it got kicked him out again.
Okay.
Yeah, he was meant to give us the call to action and he was just starting to unpack that aspect. The borrowing, the gambling, and the savings aspect. I think it's very, very much important because unless we address these three aspects amongst our people, not only South Africans, Africans as a whole, because these things cut across the whole continent. It's an area. I know some of you might be saying, we are not gambling, but have you understood where and how were you gambling? You might not be gambling now because you are now elderly or older, but you have been gambling.
my technology.
Let your technology work for you now, Titi.
Yes. Can I continue?
Yeah, continue and do quickly that the technology does not fail you.
Yes, no, definitely. So when we look into the hard realities of South African, particularly Black communities, who are struggling financially into mostly the biggest expense being umashonisa or the loan sharks, where they borrow money continuously to buy food, where they borrow money to pay the money they borrowed from different stakeholders. So that's the reality that we need to face and address. So the approach that we took is the one that we fully understand, that is the role that we need to take and ensure that part of our education program, before we can introduce the fancy terms of debentures, loan stock, derivatives, and all those fancy terms, we need to take it back to grassroots level and say, how do we help someone who's been trapped into umashonisa or gambling for the past 10 years to come out and understand the value of being able to save? How do you make that possible and make them fully understand that returns are not realized overnight? How do you make them understand the type of financial products that they buy that does create generational wealth? If you look at 90% of funeral covers is African, and then you have less than 5% of their life policy. So if They die, they only get buried, but they don't get any relief to protect their assets in any form in terms of life covers. So those are some of the educational concepts that we bring back into our communities, but ensuring that we make them aware of the impact and show them the numbers and project it previously and to the future, and also help them unlearn the habits of gambling and excessive borrowing in that regard. So our financial literacy program is based on those aspects. It's continuous. It's not something that we will achieve overnight. So our call to action is a door-to-door campaign to the stockpiles where we go and assist them in that financial literacy on how best they can make best financial decisions, school outreach, and also to our members in different channels and platforms that we can use to drive the message. It's quite a very, very difficult task to do in an environment where everyone thinks they don't have enough money. Hence, education is very, very important, and it's something that we all need to learn directly and indirectly, so that in the next 100 years, we have built these institutions that would outlive us. The same as your Old Mutual and the Sanlam have started. They started on the same principle on how best can they respond to the challenges of their very own people. And also, while we understand our history and background, but once we start to own institutions, we design policies and frameworks that speak directly to our people. And your Mashonisa environment is thriving because their language speaks directly to the needs of the people. So now it's our chance and our role to lead from the front in bringing out that educational aspect to all members, to the whole of South Africa, and to the whole of the continent, to lead from the front as we solve the world problem one equation at a time, and as we build things that last. So thank you very much to everyone who managed to join us today. And we're looking forward to having you in our classes as we break down all those money myths. And by the way, we all have money.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Ngobese. It's very encouraging, very enlightening. I want to just mention some of the things that I've taken away from this conversation today. Number one, policies are important. Well, actually, first of all, the first thing I've learned is that you can't depend on the people who oppressed you for 400 years to be concerned about your financial future. That's the first thing I've learned. That's my takeaway. The second thing is that unless you change policies, not much is going to change. The third thing that I've learned is actually a saying that I came across during this week, which says, if you can't manage 1,000 Rand, then you definitely cannot manage 10,000 Rand. You can't suddenly learn how to handle money by amassing more of it. This is why a lot of lottery winners lose it all. Financial literacy is not a side effect of wealth, but wealth is a side effect of financial literacy. Mr. Ndo, back to you.
Thank you, Paul. And I think we need to thank everyone who has joined us, those that are still here and those that have already left. I think the call to action is very clear. Firstly, the GCI members, we have a responsibility to understand the three areas. Individually, if we introspect, we'll find ourselves in those areas. Secondly, we need to also understand that we need to get this financial literacy to the young children in different communities, particularly those communities where we are implementing our programs. Therefore, one of those four, the agriculture and agro-processing, the financial services, the property development, and the retail services. In those communities where we are implementing our program, for the people to see value in what we are doing, we need to run this financial literacy so that they see where we are going. Because it's not only about us as members of GCI, it's also about those people. Because this intergenerational wealth that we want to create it is not sustainable and it won't be sustainable if it's for us alone. Those people might opt to do other things that are much more damaging in communities where we are implementing our program than what we might be thinking. It's an opportunity. I think Dr. Palilohoda raised one challenging thing, which I will have. I thought Paul was going to say, I'm also taking this one home. Dr. Palilohoda said, we are on our own. We must take charge of where we need to go. If we really want to make a difference, I think David said so even in the opening. If you want to go fast, you go alone. But if you want to go far, you need to cooperate with others so that you are able to collectively champion alternative value chains that are capable of building one brick at a time to realize that intergenerational wealth. I think GCI as an institution, it's a platform that even those that have not yet joined us, they can use it to say, yes, we are here, let's join hands. I think what you said before, as part of your take home, that you can't look at those that oppress you for many years as part of the solution. Osman said so, that we need to look at our own resources in the continent to make sure that we converge and realize that which is of importance to us. There is nothing else that we can do apart from generating from what we have. You cannot think of borrowing from far when you have our natural resources. We start with our land, we start with the money. I had an opportunity to be in one community in Northwest on Wednesday. That community on a monthly basis, it's a rural community, but on a monthly basis, there is over R1 million that they spend getting out of that community. And not out of big things that you and I that might be in the cities are looking for. Remember I said the rural community. If you check a bag of meal, a bag of 5 kg, what is it? The bright pack, you think of tea bag, you think of sugar, you think of tomatoes, a bag of potato, cabbages, and we did the calculation on Wednesday. And that money in just 1 month out of the household that exists in that village, they spend R1 million. But if you go to that community today and ask them, are you millionaires? They will tell you we are all poor. That's why we are looking forward, as Thierry said, to see you participating in our financial literacy classes. Some of those classes will be face-to-face. Some of those classes will be online, virtual, like what we are doing today, launching this program. We'll find creative ways. Some of them will just be online, where you come and log in and learn at your own pace. It is very, very much important that we join our collective efforts and do this thing together. GCI members, it's an opportunity that we can lead this cause from the front. It might not be easy, but let's look at it in all its angles. We are on the right track. Let's do it, not only for ourselves, that will be sharing the dividends not very long, but also for our children. Unemployment, you have seen from Dr. Palilohoda what it's doing among Africans in particular, and the youth, 15 to 35. Those numbers, they are very scary. That's why I'm looking forward to engaging with what needs to be done of the youth that are not in employment, not in education, and not in training. I thank you, everyone that has participated in this launch. It's an opportunity to thank you for participating, and we are looking forward to seeing you not very long. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. See you on the next GCI Zoom meeting. Take care and be safe. Goodbye.